The shape coming up the trail was one every American soldier in Vietnam knew on sight. Nearly 16 feet of aluminum hull riding on 5 road wheels per side. Blunt at the nose, square at the rear, engine growling up front. An M113, the workhorse of the war. The vehicle that carried a rifle squad into the fight and brought it back out again. Except this one was not carrying anybody. At the last halt, the rear ramp had come down and nothing emerged. No riflemen, no ammunition cans, radios, or jumble of packs and helmets. The compartment behind the driver held something else. Bolted into a steel rack and hidden behind an inch of aluminum sat 4 large spheres, each topped by a smaller sphere like a snowman. They were plumbed together and held pressures no personnel carrier had any business holding. On the roof, where a .50 caliber Browning should have been, sat a small enclosed cupola with 2 barrels protruding from its face. One was clearly a machine gun. The other was flat and wide at the muzzle, and it did not look like a gun at all. The infantry hung back. That was how this vehicle worked. It moved toward the bunker line while the riflemen kept their distance and watched. Then the cupola turned. What came out of that flat barrel reached nearly 200 yards, and the tree line ahead went up. For more than 20 years, the United States Army had asked one man to do that job. It strapped fuel tanks to his back, put a hose in his hands, and sent him walking toward a fortified position under fire. This machine was the Army's attempt to stop asking that of him. To do it, the Army took one of the most versatile armored vehicles it owned and stripped away almost everything that made it versatile. The vehicle was the self-propelled Flamethrower M132. It was built by FMC on the M113 hull and shared its tracks, automotive components, and much of its supply chain. A later version, the M132A1, used the diesel-powered M113A1 chassis. The two are often lumped together today, which is one reason the vehicle can be difficult to identify in photographs. Crews and the infantrymen who worked alongside it called it the Zippo, after the lighter. The nickname appears throughout later accounts, but its origin remains unclear. One explanation is that crews sometimes used a lighter when the electrical igniters failed. The same nickname was also applied to the Marine Corps M67 flame tank and to several improvised flame vehicles in Vietnam. No document made the name official because it never was. It belonged to the soldiers, not the Army. So why has such a visually distinctive vehicle nearly disappeared from the story of the war? Start with the numbers. The M113 family was produced in the tens of thousands. The flame variant came nowhere close. It served a narrow role in specific units during one war. From 100 yards away in a jungle photograph, it could look like just another track. Many images labeled as M132s online actually show something else. A different M113 variant, an improvised conversion, a riverine installation, or sometimes the Marine Corps M67 flame tank. More importantly, this was not simply an M113 with a flamethrower bolted to the roof. The passenger seats were gone. The troop compartment was gone. The original commander station was gone. The vehicle's interior had been rebuilt around a single purpose. That was a serious sacrifice. The Army made it deliberately. To understand why, you first have to understand what the M132 was intended to replace. The man-portable flamethrower had been part of the American arsenal since the Second World War, and it had always been a weapon that worked, but cost too much to use. It worked because certain targets did not respond to rifle fire. A bunker with overhead cover and a narrow firing slit could absorb small arms fire all day. A trench system connected to tunnels could be cleared and reoccupied 20 minutes later. Fighting positions dug beneath root systems or under the floors of fortified villages were problems infantrymen often had to solve slowly, expensively, and more than once. Flame reached places bullets could not. It moved around corners and through apertures, and its effect did not depend on striking a man directly. The cost was the operator. He carried fuel and propellant tanks on his back, dozens of pounds in addition to everything else a soldier already carried. He had only a few seconds of total firing time. His practical range was measured in dozens of yards, which meant that after carrying the weapon across the battlefield, he still had to approach close enough for the enemy to see him clearly. His silhouette was unlike anyone else's in the squad, and the enemy understood exactly what it meant. The popular image involves a bullet striking a fuel tank and producing an instant fireball. The real danger was less cinematic and more constant. Tanks could be punctured, fuel could leak, pressure could fall, fires could start. The entire system could fail at the worst possible moment. A man carrying that much weight could not sprint easily, drop flat quickly, or escape bad ground as readily as the rifleman beside him. Vietnam did not remove the need for that capability. If anything, it renewed it. Bunkers, trenches, spider holes, fortified villages, and vegetation thick enough to conceal a defended position 20 yards away were exactly the kinds of targets flame weapons had been designed to attack. Flame was not the only answer. Artillery could reduce a bunker complex, and air support could destroy far more than a single position. Tank guns, recoilless rifles, demolition charges, and grenades could all attack hardened targets, often from farther away and with greater effect against structures. But those options required clearance, ammunition, coordination, and time. A mechanized unit making sudden contact at close range in heavy vegetation often had none of them. The Army began asking a different question. Instead of building a better backpack, could it stop asking one soldier to carry the entire weapon through the final 50 yards? The answer was to give the flamethrower an engine, tracks, and armor. Development began earlier than most people assume. In June 1954, the Army Chemical Corps launched a study into converting vehicles already in service into mechanized flamethrowers. The result was the E-31-E36 system, an E-31 fuel and pressure unit paired with an E-36 flame gun. 3 kits were tested on the M59, the M113's predecessor. That installation carried 400 gallons and provided roughly 70 seconds of fire. Figures the finished M132 would never match. Then the M113 entered the picture. In 1959, a contract was awarded for 3 improved E31R1, E36R1 systems to be installed in M113s, ending work on the M59 version. The older carrier held more fuel and burned longer, but the M113 was entering service across the Army. Common hulls, tracks, spare parts, and maintenance mattered more than raw capacity. The prototypes mounted the flame gun inside an M1 cupola, the enclosed type used on M48 and M60 tanks. The cupola sat over the commander's position and carried a coaxial machine gun beside the flame projector. That machine gun was initially the 50 caliber M85 and was later replaced by the 7.62mm M73. Testing continued through 1961 at Fort Benning, Georgia and Fort Greely, Alaska. The Army was developing a general-purpose armored flamethrower, not a vehicle designed specifically for jungle warfare. In March 1962, the Chemical Corps Technical Committee standardized the system as the M10-8, combining the M10 fuel and pressure unit with the M8 flame gun cupola group. In 1963, Army Materiel Command type classified the complete vehicle as the self-propelled flamethrower M132. That December, as the diesel-powered M132A1 approached production, the flame version followed as the M132A1. FMC ultimately built 351 vehicles. Published totals list 201 M132s and 150 M132A1s. The crew consisted of 2 men, a driver at the front left and a gunner commander directly behind him beneath the cupola. They had to drive, fight, and maintain the vehicle, then rely on outside help if it became disabled. The cupola traversed manually through 360 degrees. The 2 weapons moved together from 15 degrees below horizontal to 55 degrees above it, allowing the gunner to engage targets without turning and exposing the entire hull. His visibility, however, remained limited. 4 vision blocks and a sight gave him a view little better than peering through a mail slot. Behind him sat the removable M10 unit, 4 spherical 50-gallon fuel tanks, each topped by a smaller compressed air sphere. In total, 200 gallons of thickened, gasoline-based flame agent rode inside the hull. Depending on the fuel mixture and test conditions, the flame gun could project that agent to roughly 200 meters. The rear ramp remained in place because the tank assembly had to be removable. The coaxial machine gun was not decorative. It allowed the crew to suppress enemy positions and answer contact without wasting flame agent that required specialized equipment and time to replace. On paper, the design was formidable. The real question was whether it could reach the places where it was needed. Sometimes it could, and the effect was often far greater than the size of the vehicle suggested. The M132 served with armored cavalry and mechanized formations. U.S. Armor and Cavalry Headquarters companies received at least one, while South Vietnamese armored regiments received 4 each. Later accounts placed the first pair in Vietnam in late 1964, although that date is thinly documented. What is documented is the recommendation made by the Army Concept Team in Vietnam. Each regiment should receive 4 M132s and 2 M113 service units. Not escorts, service units. That distinction reveals how the Army understood the system. The M132 was a flamethrower that required its own mobile logistical support. A March 1967 U.S. Army Vietnam report described M132s working in pairs against bunkers and dense vegetation seeded with mines and booby traps. The flame might not reach a protected enemy, but its heat could detonate mines and strip away vegetation, often the more valuable result. In defensive positions, M132s covered gaps other direct-fire weapons could not reach and illuminated the ground at night. On the move, they protected columns from roadside brush, where an ambush might begin at 15 yards. During the June 1966 fighting near Ap Tao O, an M132 was directed against enemy positions along the road. A later Army account credited a single 3-second burst with destroying a recoilless rifle team. In January 1967, during Operation Cedar Falls, M132s from the 1st Squadron, 4th Cavalry, burned vegetation and fields in the Iron Triangle. On the rivers, M132s were sometimes backed onto armored troop carriers and used to fire toward the banks. Crews generally fired the coaxial machine gun first, closed under its cover, and used flame only within effective range. Some sprayed an unlit burst first and ignited it with a second, a technique inherited from Second World War flame tanks. The gunner sat directly behind the driver, close enough that the driver was instructed to keep his hatch shut when the flame projector was in use. This was where the concept collided with the terrain. Armor reduced the operator's exposure, but it could not change the geometry of the weapon. The M132 still had to approach within a few hundred yards at most, and much closer in heavy vegetation. The gunner needed a clear line of sight to a target he often could not see. To get one, the vehicle had to use the places where the enemy already expected armor: trails, paddy dikes, and gaps in the tree line. Those locations could be mined or covered by anti-armor weapons. The aluminum hull could stop small arms fire, but not a mine, recoilless rifle, or rocket-propelled grenade. The M132 therefore stayed in support, protected by infantry or other armor rather than leading the advance. Then there was its appetite for fuel. 200 gallons sounded enormous compared with a backpack flamethrower, but it provided only about 32 seconds of total firing time. Replenishing the system required specialized equipment. The XM45E1, a dedicated service vehicle based on the M548 chassis, was developed for the task but did not reach Vietnam until 1968. Keeping one M132 loaded required another vehicle and crew. With only 2 men aboard, a disabled M132 could not recover itself and had almost no manpower to spare. The Army had gotten the operator out of the open. It had not gotten flame out of close range. The M132 was not removed because of a cover-up or an international ban. It disappeared for reasons that were less dramatic but ultimately more convincing. The first was its mission. The vehicle attacked fortified positions at short range where standoff weapons were difficult to use. Vietnam made that role unusually relevant, but it was not the war the Army expected to fight afterward. After 1973, American armored doctrine shifted toward the possibility of a mechanized war against Soviet forces on the open terrain of Central Europe. In that environment, a lightly armored, two-man vehicle with an effective reach of roughly 200 meters offered little value. At the same time, the alternatives improved. Shoulder-fired rockets, recoilless weapons, better tank ammunition, artillery, and air-delivered munitions could all attack hardened positions from distances the M132 could never approach safely. Once other weapons could strike the same targets from farther away, the case for a dedicated short-range flame vehicle became difficult to sustain. The maintenance burden also mattered. Pressure vessels, valves, plumbing, and thickened fuel required specialized parts, training, and a dedicated refueling vehicle for a capability the Army was using less frequently. At the same time, the Army was training fewer soldiers to operate flamethrowers. A specialized weapon that is rarely used eventually becomes more expensive to maintain than the capability is considered worth. In 1978, the United States ended the tactical use and further development of conventional flamethrowers. That point needs to be stated carefully. No treaty required their removal. The decision was made unilaterally by the United States because military planners concluded that flame weapons no longer fit modern combat requirements. The 1980 Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons and its Protocol 3 came later. It regulates the use of incendiary weapons, but does not impose a blanket international ban on flamethrowers. Humanitarian concerns almost certainly influenced the debate. Flame weapons had long been controversial, both for their effects and for the risks imposed on their operators. Even so, the tactical and logistical case was enough to end the program. The remaining systems were phased out during the following years. By the early 1980s, the M132 and its related flame weapons had disappeared from U.S. service. The contrast explains the vehicle's fate. The M113 chassis beneath it continued serving for another 40 years and remains in use around the world. The hull survived because it could adapt. The flame variant disappeared because the Army no longer believed one short-range effect justified converting, supplying, and maintaining an entire armored personnel carrier. Very few M132s survive. One is displayed at the War Remnants Museum in Ho Chi Minh City. In the United States, one of the few remaining examples is held by the Army Chemical Corps Museum at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. Its place in military history is more important than its rarity. American armored flamethrowers stretched from the Sherman conversions of the Second World War to the M67 flame tank used by the Marine Corps in Vietnam. The Army's line ended with the M132. It was the last standardized self-propelled flamethrower fielded by the United States Army. No direct successor followed. The vehicle also showed how much the M113 chassis could absorb. The same hull became a command post, mortar carrier, ambulance, recovery vehicle, and even a fire truck. The M132 stood at the far edge of that versatility, where modification produced a different vehicle beneath a familiar outline. Every feature that strengthened it in its specialized role weakened it somewhere else. The fuel tanks that gave it 32 seconds of fire displaced an entire infantry squad. The enclosed cupola protected the gunner, but narrowed his view on a battlefield where seeing first could determine survival. The armor removed the flamethrower operator from the open, but placed him inside a vehicle that still had to travel down trails and through gaps the enemy was already watching. The crew also deserves to be remembered. 2 men operated a machine that carried no infantry, could not recover itself, and existed to approach defended positions more closely than almost anything else in the column. What hid the M132 from history was not secrecy, but resemblance. It looked like the most common armored vehicle of the Vietnam War, and over time, it disappeared into the photographs of it. The M113 endured because it could become almost anything. The M132 disappeared because it could do only one thing. If you want more forgotten American hardware, the experimental, the specialized, and the equipment history quietly filed away, subscribe and stay with the channel. And settle this one in the comments. Was the M132 a smart way to get flamethrower crews out of the open? Or was the armored flame vehicle already obsolete by the time it reached Vietnam? If you served with one or alongside one, we want to hear from you.